Good morning, Ruby. Normally we have Patricia, but she's out today and I'm in New York City. So we're going to kick off the episode here. We usually start episodes with what we've been doing, what you've read, seen, done, which is always a fun and good check-in. So what have you been up to?
Well, I am thinking a lot about the local. I'm thinking a lot about localism, and I'm thinking about how we, the people, might be called upon now to kind of build an agenda for the country that starts from the grassroots up rather than from the oligarchs down. And so I've been thinking a lot about something that are called citizen assemblies, which I did not know about, but read about in, I think it was the New Yorker, where they talked about a city in Oregon, I think it was, where they were having a problem with youth homelessness. And they brought people together to have conversations, to, first discuss the problem, but then to talk about the solutions. And when they got to the solutions, they said, these are the people who need to be in the room if we're going to talk about solutions. So it might have been the mayor or somebody from the city council or somebody who was their state rep. So they wanted to move to solutionizing really pretty quickly after defining the problem. And I love that idea. I think we do a lot of problematizing without moving to talking about what the potential solutions are, because that's where the hard work is. And so these are the things I'm thinking about, and I'm trying to read a lot about civic imagination and how we could ignite civic imagination. So that's the kind of one of the tracks that I'm on right now.
Oh my God, that's amazing. And, on the flight over, instead of watching movies on airplanes, I'm a reader on the airplane, and I'm reading Mrs. Morgan's Book Brigade. And of course, I don't have notes or anything in front of me, so I'm forgetting things. But Mrs. Morgan, who was the heiress to the Morgan fortune, and she, during World War I, II, had basically a group of librarians that went to France and realized that in order to rebuild a community, you have to start with a community center, right? And they had a library and they would read to the children because the parents, there were no schools, right? The schools were all blown up. There was nothing left. And then they would read to the kids and keep the kids busy while the parents did what they needed to do, and also had teas and socializing moments for the community so that they could rebuild emotionally.
Oh my gosh, this is amazing.
It's
the same track. And
it's the same track.
And I feel like a lot of people want to be talking about these kinds of things now because our fabric seems so frayed as a country. And I think there's a sense of rebuilding that needs to happen. And I've been thinking about revival, the idea of revival, which of course has all kinds of meanings, spiritual and civic. So I've been thinking about what would it look like if we were all engaged in the process of an American revival, and thinking about the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence, and thinking about what a new declaration would look like.
Right.
And so I feel like there's work out there to be done, and that we, the people, are going to have to do it. That our politicians, someone said politics is too important to be left to the politicians. And I think that's where we are right now.
100%. This is exciting, Ruby.
Yeah, I know. It's a lot of work.
Exciting.
I know.
All right, let's get into the interview. So, Okay. So, welcome to the Art Equation.
Thank you.
Welcome to The Art Equation, a podcast from Now Be Here. I'm one of your hosts, Patricia Ortega, and our historian and independent curator.
I'm your other host, Kim Schoenstatt, a contemporary artist and organizer of Now Be Here, a directory of and for women and non-binary artists.
On this podcast, we have a little charla, a little bachipapo about making art and making exhibitions. We invite fellow artists, curators, archivists, and people from different areas of the art world to share their knowledge and their experience.
We are curious about what goes on in the day-to-day of arting. We want to talk shop, get in the weeds about what goes into art shows, talk with the makers and the doers of the art world. Welcome to the Art Equation. Okay, so Patricia and I have prepared some questions, and I'm also going to read a bio at the top of our episode for listeners, as usual. So let's get into it. We are here with Ruby Lerner. Ruby Lerner is the founding executive director of Creative Capital, an innovative arts foundation that adapts venture capital concepts to support individual artists. Under her leadership, Creative Capital designed a comprehensive support system for artists that combined money with advisory support. It committed more than $40 million in financial and advisory support to 511 projects, representing 642 artists. This commitment helped grantees leverage nearly $100 million in additional support. She stepped down from the organization in June 2016 to pursue consulting work and independent research. In 2017, Lerner became the inaugural senior policy advisor to the Herberger Institute at Arizona State University and senior advisor to the Patty Disney Center for Life and Work at CalArts. In 2018, she began serving as an advisor to the Cultural and Art Program at the Open Society Foundations, assisting in the design of the Soros International Arts Fellowship. She worked with the fellows from the beginning of the program in 2018 until its closure at the end of 2024. Welcome, Ruby.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to get to have this conversation with you.
I am so excited to share you. Like, you're one of my favorite people. We've met a few years ago, and it was like mutual admiration club because you're fascinating, and I want to get into it. Okay, so correct me if I'm wrong, but my capture of you is strategy, grit, and persistence. From losing the North Carolina State Spelling Bee twice to becoming the first audience development director for the Manhattan Theater Club to founding Creative Capital. Can you share a little bit about your trajectory and what the idea of persistence and grit means to you?
You left out bossy.
Oh,
And
okay,
so
great.
I think that's really one of my maybe least endearing qualities, but it is one of the ones that has been a through line in my career. I'm a little stubborn. And I think I have a hard time if I'm not the person in charge. So that's kind of, these are not fabulous qualities, but relatable, and they have propelled me forward. Well, I'm the child of immigrants, and I always like to mention that because I think that is a difference in the way people grow up. And so my parents were European Jewish immigrants, and they landed in a small town in western North Carolina, which is where I grew up. And I think that's another thing because I grew up as an outsider, and so I have an outsider mentality, and I think in this world that's a useful quality to have because it automatically gives you a kind of empathy that maybe other people don't are not necessarily bred with, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So I think those have been really important in my personal development as a human, and I think they fed into all the organizations I've run and leadership work that I've done. I left this town in western North Carolina, Lenoir, North Carolina, and went to Goucher College, which is right outside of Baltimore. It was a women's college when I was there.
Nice.
That was an amazing experience to go a little bit farther north, and I had an amazing time there. And then I ended up coming back to North Carolina, to the University of North Carolina, and I started out in library school, and I was in library school for 3 weeks. And I realized I was in the wrong place. I'd never quit anything in my life. I'm just not somebody who does that. But I realized I had to get out because they had seating charts, and they called on people in class. And this is graduate school. And one day, this woman, she wasn't in her seat according to the seating chart. And the professor said, you're not sitting in your seat according to the seating chart. And if you don't, I'm afraid one of these days you're going to get counted absent. This woman looked straight at the professor and said, well, good. Can I leave then? And I thought, she just talked back to the teacher. I haven't had to deal with that since the 7th grade. Right. So I realized I'm not in the right place. So I got myself out of that program. I ended up working in Chapel Hill for a couple of years. And then I ended up going to grad school in theater. And I had studied religion at Goucher. And, if you know anything about the history of theater really grew out of the church. And so it was an opportunity to just kind of carry forward. So I had been taking free classes because I was a full-time employee at the university, and I was in this one professor's class, a theater history class, I guess. And at the end of the class, I walked up to him one day to ask a question. He said, are you in grad school here? And I said, no. He said, well, I think maybe you ought to be. And I was like, okay, because this was the 70s and this is just kind of how your life happened to you.
Yeah.
We weren't, now kids are so intentional about every move that they make and feel that they have to be, and they have a lot of pressure from their parents to be more intentional. I just kind of, in the early years, kind of wandered into my life. And I'm kind of grateful for that in retrospect, that I had that opportunity really to do that. So I was in graduate school there, and I ended up running the theater, the student-run part of the department there, and I ran a summer theater in Charlotte for a few years.
So you're already running the show.
I was already running the show. Yeah, that's kind of the way it was. There in my whatever it was, late 20s, mid 20s even. But I ended up in this incredible program, also back in Western North Carolina, not the community I grew up in. But I ended up in a program called the Visiting Artist Program. And I was based at a community college in Western North Carolina for 2 years. And that was also an incredible experience. When that was done, I thought, I've seen a lot of trees and squirrels, and now I need some subtitles. So I think maybe I need to go to New York. So I ended up coming to New York, and I ended up getting a job at the Manhattan Theater Club right away, which was amazing. And I was there for a little over 4 years. And then I got homesick again, came back to the South to run an amazing organization, really groundbreaking organization called Alternate Roots, which is a grassroots cultural organization. And then I made a lateral move over to independent media locally, and then moved back to New York and ran the national media organization. And then I was asked to come start Creative Capital. So there's a little bit of all of these institutions in Creative Capital, which was, a real sort of culmination for me, because I got to design something really from the get-go. The other organizations, I had, come in to run them, sometimes to have to repair them, but at Creative Capital, I got to invent it.
Well, let's get into Creative Capital, actually, because that was one of the things I really wanted to ask you. I mean, I kind of think of this format as a moment where I get to ask my friends and colleagues really dumb questions that I've always wanted to ask them. So you started Creative Capital in response to the culture wars. For listeners, I'm going to read a bit from your website because you put it so succinctly. Quote, "The intensifying culture wars culminated in the NEA 4 case, National Endowment for the Arts versus Finley. It wound its way up to the Supreme Court in 1998, and we lost. That loss, along with the pressure from Congress, caused the NEA, National Endowment for the Arts, to stop funding most individual artists' projects, a policy that continues to this day. It was devastating to have the government, which seemed to support its creative individual voices, turn against the community. It wasn't just the loss of funding. It was also the impact of devaluing artists' contributions to the cultural life of the country." Okay, so that's the moment we're in. That was the case. And then in response, you decided, I need to do something about this.
Well, I think collectively we decided something needed to happen. I mean, there were a lot of conversations and conferences, and a lot of people were writing about, about that moment. But the person who really acted was Arch Gillies, who was the president of the Andy Warhol Foundation at that time. And he contacted me, I think, somewhere along the way, maybe even as early as 97 or 98. And he said, I want to do something because we've talked enough about it, right? We need to do something. And he said, I'm going to go around the country and just see who I can enlist. The other thing that was happening at the same time that resources were being cut at a national level was we were in an economic boom moment, which was the dot-com boom moment of the late 90s. So we had this economic boom. At the same time, we were having this sort of arts bust, right? And so, so Arch had the brilliant idea to talk to people about using a kind of venture capital approach to work with artists as an experiment. He spent some time on the West Coast. He talked to anybody, foundations, individuals, anybody who would let him in the door. And because there was a lot of excess capital floating around, both for individuals, but especially for foundation endowments, they could invest in an experiment without having to in any way disturb the funding that they were already doing to organizations, right? Because they had additional resources.
Got it.
So that's a really important part of the story. I feel like I don't talk about that enough, but we were a product of two forces. One, the negative force that was happening at the National Endowment, and the positive force that was a thriving economy. And that raises questions about whether something like creative capital could happen now in this moment, because I think we're probably headed into a recession if we aren't already in one, and whether the resources would be there to the extent they were. When we launched, we had $5 million in pledges, commitments, and actual cash. And that obviously that was not going to be enough to run an organization for forever, but it was such a great start. And as Arch used to say, it was enough to try things and fail and start all over again, which was the ethos of Creative Capital. We got a stamp that we stamped on everything, like almost every single piece of paper, to remind us, and it's just 2 words, try this. And that was the ethos of Creative Capital.
So Creative Capital has a different structure.
Correct.
Like I apply to a lot, like any artist, you apply to a lot of fellowships or grants and blah, blah, blah. And they're fairly straightforward. Here's a bucket of money, go have fun.
Yeah. I say
Creative Capital was different.
Right. I say the standard was, here's a check, send us a report. I felt that, again, I had this mandate of the venture model. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is a success methodology. And I thought, we don't really have that in our field, right? It's like a different mindset. And I felt like we could build something brand new that had never existed before if we just kind of thought through what the structure needed to look like. So I didn't know also many things I don't know about, and I didn't know anything about design, but I knew that I wanted Creative Capital to be a kind of designed organization. And so we started with the project, support for the project, and that consisted of money and mentorship and a great relationship with the staff, networking, skills building, a whole lot of things were built into just the first component. And we don't have time today for me to go into how the money was parsed out. But again, like venture capital, if they're going to make, say, $1 million investment in something, they're not giving you the $1 million up front. They're benchmarking the money and allocating it to certain steps along the way. Well, we did that too. So the grant was for $50,000, and nobody got a $50,000 check like a regular fellowship might be. It was parsed out through the life of the grant. So that was the first step, was a commitment to the project. The second step was a commitment to the person beyond the project. Because the question we were always asking is, what will it take for someone to leave us stronger than when they came in? We were very interested in your long-term thrivability as an artist. And so there it was mostly about skills building and relationship building. But we really invested a lot in helping people think about real estate, to think about financial planning, to think about a lot of things that no one ever talks to artists about.
Yeah,
right?
The business of art is not something that graduate school teaches you.
It doesn't. It's better now, but in some places, I can tell you in the early days, there were schools that wanted to bring us in. There was so much resistance from the faculty, and people would say things like, well, this is vocational training. And we were like, okay. I mean, we're just trying to help people have thriving careers. I don't know what business you're in, but whatever. Anyway, so that was an amazing part of what we offered. And then the next component was building out the community. Mm-hmm. And building out the community of funded artists so that people could be resources to each other, but also bringing in a group of what I call the opportunity creators, so that they could experience the work and share what they knew from their purchase as curators or producers or publishers or editors or other funders, right? And share that with the artists. And then the final component was engaging the public. And we were not a presenter ourselves in any way. So the way we did that was by providing information, a lot of information online. And then also this event that we did, which brought in literally hundreds of people. It was a very expensive event. I actually asked the CFO to never tell me how much it really cost us to do that event.
Oh, that's hilarious. Oh my God.
Because I knew it was expensive. But it was so worth it because I could fill this room with the tangible, really tangible outcomes
Yeah.
of those events over the years.
Yeah.
Plus, they were just lots of fun.
And what you were trying to replace, right, was the confidence in the artist, right? The NEA grants, National Endowment of the Arts grants for individual artists, that platform was a vote of confidence, right?
Correct.
It was sort of this like stamp of approval. And when that got pulled away, you needed to not only create that out of whole cloth, but you had to find a way very smartly to recreate that kind of vote of confidence.
That's absolutely right. Absolutely right. And I think beyond the confidence, we wanted people to be excited about what they were seeing. And this relates to a little bit to the application itself. And even that was controversial. We didn't do anything that wasn't controversial. The application, we really focused on ideas. We started with, what is it? What's your fundamental idea here? And what's the impact you want your work to have?
Right.
Those were the guiding questions. And it was deceptive because there were only 6 or 7 questions. We didn't ask for work samples at the first round. We really wanted to hear your ideas. Everybody was like, "You're going to fund an artist without a work sample?" And I said, "Of course we're not. But we're gonna make sure that we're excited about their ideas before we ask them to submit all that other stuff, right?"
So I've looked at the Creative Capital application.
It hasn't changed that much.
It's really intimidating. It is one of the most rigorous, and there's different rounds.
Yes.
So for listeners, this application, you start with the title of their project. You have to give a 1-line description. You have to give a 1-sentence description. You have to give a paragraph description. You have to give an essay description. And it's all framed in kind of different angles. And so you're really having to consider the project from multiple viewpoints and articulate what you want it to be. As an artist, that's hard mode.
Yeah, it was that way on purpose. I think people looked at the application superficially and thought, well, there are only 6 questions here or 7 questions here. It's not going to be that hard. Then when they got into it, they found out how hard it actually was. And from an evaluative standpoint, it was actually quite revealing, because if you couldn't answer the question about impact, then Creative Capital was probably not the greatest grant for you.
Right.
So it became easier. If you weren't interested in using the non-monetary services that we were providing, probably not a great grant for you. I mean, if it was just going to be about the money to just do the project and then you were just going to move on to the next project, that was not what we were trying to do. We were trying to identify groundbreaking ideas and artists who were at catalytic moments in the life of their careers and their career trajectory, and that they knew they were at a catalytic moment, right? So that they would take advantage of as much as it made sense for them to take advantage of, so that, again, by the time they left, they would be at a different point.
Which is incredible. I want to get back to the culture wars because it feels like we're back in it.
Okay.
And here we are again.
Yeah, so on my website, for anybody who becomes curious after this, I hope you will, there's an essay called On Culture and Power. The website project would not have happened without Heather Bondari, and some people may know her. She was one of the co-directors of Mixed Greens, which was a gallery that was here for a number of years. She's really fantastic, and
she also did the Art World Conference.
Yes, that's exactly
which
right.
I did attend in LA, and
yes,
that was fascinating.
Yes, she is great, and they have a website also. Creative Study, I think, is the website. Anyway, she's phenomenal and was an incredible partner on this whole enterprise. So she was digging around just online for things that I might not have had. I kept a lot more stuff than I realized I had, which was great. And she found other stuff online. And one of the things she found was a piece that was in The Independent, which was the magazine that I was the publisher of when I ran the filmmakers organization, AIVF. I didn't write regularly for it, but I wrote occasionally for it. And sometimes I would do other things, like I did a panel at NYU, and the editor said, "I'd love to excerpt this for a magazine." And I remember saying, "Of course." And then I didn't remember anything about it. And Heather dug this up, and I reread it, and I started crying.
Oh, no.
Because I thought, take out some of the time-dated references, and I could have written this yesterday.
Yeah.
This is so depressing. So, we're back in it. I think, as you know, I did a presentation in December, and this piece is also on the website now. It's called Reset 2025. And in there, I really talk about starting at ground zero with all of the things that we need to be doing for ourselves. And I think in a lot of arts organizations, and I think this is probably true for individual artists too, we don't think as much about earned income as we need to be thinking about it. But this is particularly true with organizations. And so earned income for me is one of the starting points. But the other starting point is in building deep relationships with the constituency you already have. Mm-hmm. And being aggressive about building your mailing list. And this is something that I talked to you.
Yeah, that was like our first meeting with you were like, mailing list. Let's talk about your mailing list.
Yeah.
And 100%. Like, my old boss, John Baldessari, he was really good at keeping in touch with people.
There you go.
And he didn't have an email list. Like now we have a different mode of communication, but he would just make sure that people were invited to the shows.
That's it.
Yeah.
So people love a sense of invitation, and I think that's what you want to do when you're building a list. And I think that, again, people are cavalier about that because we have social media. Well, the problem with social media is you don't own that. You're sharecropping data was a phrase that I had read somewhere, and my heart sank to my stomach when I read it. But it's true, you don't own it, and you really don't control the algorithms. And I can't tell you, over the last year, people have said to me, something changed. I used to get X number of hits on my Instagram, and it changed, and I got a lot fewer, like hundreds fewer people or dozens fewer people, whatever the numbers are. And they were like, I'm pretty sure they changed the algorithm on me.
They did.
And so we are victims in that situation. You're not controlling anything when you're posting to your social media accounts. And that's not to say that it isn't a great tool. It's a great tool.
It is a tool. It's a promotional tool. But it's also like, I've missed shows because my friends were like, oh, I just posted on social media. And I'm like, I'm just not on it that much. It doesn't make me feel good lately, so I've been really avoiding it.
I think a lot of people feel that way now.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
So I'm missing shows, to your point, which
absolutely.
is where the mailing list and the direct email communication.
Exactly. So I think building your email list is, again, it's important to do social media. You should be doing it. But to not have a mailing list because you think social media is taking care of all of your issues, no, it's not. So you need to be building your mailing list, and you need to do that really aggressively. And I'll talk to people, and I'll tell you, I just had a conversation with very mature artists. I mean, people I've worked with for now, I don't know, probably 20 some years. And I said, did you not listen to me? You don't have a mailing list. What are you talking about? And I said, but you email people all the time. So actually you have a mailing list.
Yeah, you
right?
have a mailing list.
You just haven't put it in a mailing list program, but you have a mailing list. Everyone needs to do that. That's your future. And the people who are good at that, you will find, as you just said, even in different form, John Baldessari invited the people he needed to invite to everything. And that's how we need to think about it. This is your invitation list. This is your big dinner party list, right?
Right. And one of the things that I get from it, too, is the stats. You know that's how right. You rate with somebody because you can see open rates.
Correct. And
you also know, like, I've gotten used to, like, how these systems work. But all of a sudden, somebody goes from 2 opens to 70 opens. I know they forwarded on.
That's right.
And so then I know, okay, this person's interested. This person who has never opened any of my emails, right. That's a cold fish. Like, I should stop bothering them.
Right.
Like, they're not interested. Right. So it's an interesting insight.
Absolutely. And again, we're just not that great at it. And I think that is something that if you're not interested in doing it or inclined to do it, I hired somebody around the launch of the website to do that for me. It's super important. And then communicating with that group of people. So it's not just that you have this list, but that you are sharing information with people. I just got your newsletter a little while back. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Some people are allergic to the word newsletter. Call it whatever you want to. It can just be an email. It can be an informal email.
Bulletin.
It can be a bulletin. It can be any form that makes you comfortable. But the idea is you're sharing what's happening in your work with your community. Yeah. And that's the way to think about it. I don't think about it promotionally at all. I think about it as again, it's like the dinner party, and I'm bringing you all together to share this great thing that happened, or this question that I have. It's like, I'm struggling with X or Y. Does anybody have any ideas about this? I mean, you should be able to enlist your community in that engaged way. That's the setup for what I think is the next thing, and that is really being supported by your community. So this is a question that I've been asking for a long time, and that is it possible for an individual artist or an individual organization to build a sustaining community around themselves, right? Mm-hmm. So this is not like, that zillionaire out there who should be on my board, or that zillionaire who should be funding me, who has never heard of me and doesn't care about what I'm doing. Get over yourself. It's not going to happen. But you're leapfrogging over this group of 1,000 people or 2,000 people that you have on your mailing list who do care about you, who have come to things, who are following what you do. Those are your people. Those are your people. So how are you engaging your people? I did a little exercise. No one wants to go to lunch with me anymore because I drag out my calculator and I make them watch this calculator exercise.
Right.
But
I love this one.
I know. Me too. So I was having lunch with a friend. He lets me use his name, so it's okay. The wonderful Nigel Smith from the Flea Theater. And we had this lunch, and he was pretty glum. He was like, oh, the fundraising is killing me. It's just like it's never ending. I said, that is correct. It's true. It's never ending. And it's awful just to feel like you have to do that, for 24 hours a day. I said, but let's start the conversation in a different place. What's your budget? And he said, well, we'd like to have a budget of $1.8 million. So I said, well, we're going to take your desired budget there at $1.8 million. I said, how many people are on your mailing list? And they're a theater, and they've been around for many, many years. So they have a pretty big list at 9,000. I said, okay, well, we're going to take that $1.8 million and we're going to divide it by 9,000. And that will tell us how much each of those 9,000 people need to give you.
All right, I'm getting my calculator.
Okay, in order for you to have what you need. It's $200 a year.
Okay.
Listen, when I do this exercise with people, no one is taught fundraising this way, by the way. No one. It's like how to write a grant, how to schmooze rich people, how to do events where you hopefully get rich people to come. No one's talking about building things from the grassroots up because it's hard. It is hard. And it's slow. But it's honest work. It's honest work. It's honest work. Okay, so $200 a year. That'd be hard for me to write a check for somebody, for $200 at any one time. Let's go one step further and divide that 200 by 12 months in the year.
Right.
$16.67 a month.
That's like 1 cup of New York coffee.
Maybe two. Maybe 2 cups of New York coffee. So what the point is, you are spending more on your coffee than you are on supporting a cultural institution that you care about. And if that is happening, and it is happening, what aren't we doing to change the conversation? So my next task is going to be figuring out, what is the text of that conversation that we need to be having with people. But if we're not as important to people as their coffee, then what are we doing here? Right. So we have a lot of homework to do on this front. So this is just like for regular support, but I've taken it one step further even, because I think about, again, this idea of a permanent sustaining community and the idea of building an endowment. The group of organizations that I did this presentation to, most of them are organizations with budgets of under $1 million, so they're not huge budget organizations, but they all wanted to talk about endowment. And mostly when you hear the word endowment, we think about that for the largest organizations, like the museums or symphonies, right? We don't talk about it that much when you're talking about a small or mid-sized organization, but we need to. In fact, I could argue it's almost more important for these organizations or for an individual, because you don't have 3 rich people you can call up and say, we're having a deficit this year, could you just underwrite it, right?
Right.
So we really need a better ecosystem of support. And having a permanent fund, I think, is a really important component of financial health.
What does that look like for an artist?
Yeah, well...
just asking for a friend.
Yeah. Well, I've done a lot of financial planning work with individual artists also. Just financial literacy basics, because I'm not a trained person, but I had to figure this out for myself, too, as an individual. Mm-hmm. The same thing, when you get ready to retire, you need to have your own personal endowment, so it's not that different from an organization. And one thing that I recommend to individuals is to basically do your net worth statement twice a year. So that what is net worth? Net worth is just what you own minus what you owe. It's that simple. So I own a house. My house is worth X. Oh, but we have a mortgage on the house, right? So I have a 401k. It's this. I have other savings. It's this.
Right.
So anything that is going to affect that final amount that you have, that is your endowment, that's why you should start as early as you can. The other important piece of this is that, yes, it's about the money and the amount of money you can put away, but it's also about the time that the money has to mature.
To grow. Yeah.
Grow. You know, there's a funny story about Albert Einstein, and apparently someone asked him at one point what he thought the miracle of the universe was, and he said it's compound interest.
That's hilarious. So we've talked about a few different touch points that artists can use.
Yes.
So we start with the mailing list.
Yeah.
And then how do we use the mailing
Correct.
list? We can let people know about shows. We can let people just know what we're up to and just to check in. That's one touch point. There's social media, which is a touch point. There's your website.
Yeah.
We haven't really talked about that.
Yeah, and I would say that one of the things I've discovered is that a lot of websites, I just did a big research project, and this was mostly looking at organizations, and I was shocked at how incomplete the information was on the website, and what a not good job most of us are doing telling our stories.
And this is my common refrain whenever anybody asks me advice about website. You have to be able to update it yourself. Because going to an artist's website and seeing that their last show, which they have on their front page, was 5 years ago,
Correct.
is no help. Like, that is the first thing anybody does is Google you.
That's right.
And they're going to go to your website and they're going to want to see the goods.
And this is what I say, is nobody's going to your social media first. If people find out about you, they want to see a website. So if somebody who has decided that Instagram is as good as a website, the answer is no, it is not. Everyone needs their own web presence, because on your website, you have much more capacity to tell your own story, to tell your narrative, and to archive really everything you're doing.
Like, when you're going to an artist's website, what is the number one thing you want to see?
Well, there's a template that a lot of people use, or seems to be the exact same template. And I don't like seeing that, because you're a unique presence. I think you want the website, everything about it, to kind of reflect you. I want it to be more engaging visually. I want it to be more engaging kind of philosophically in a way. I think this is something people need to rethink.
Yeah. Well, now I have to rethink my website.
Well, I do love my website, I have to say.
Your website is
and,
really
and,
special.
And it is very special.
But you also had a very clear vision for what you wanted it to do.
But I'm also going to tell you that there's a meta story of the site, which is less pretty. And that is, when I went back to read things after we got the site up, and I reread a bunch of stuff, and I realized that the story of my site was a story of loss. And it is a story of how much of the infrastructure that we had in our field, in the arts field, is now gone. And every time we have one of these, I call them incursions, like the thing we're going through now, we lose things. We capitulate things away, and then some things just disappear, and we don't get them back. Mm-hmm. And then the next incursion comes, and we're weakened. Mm-hmm. And so we can't resist the next. So we're in a weakened state right now, and I think we're going to lose everything there is to lose. So at a federal level, we're going to lose everything.
And yeah, I mean, that gets us into a very different conversation.
Oh my gosh. Boy, we can talk.
Boy, we can talk. But we didn't get to, at the end of interviews, we ask this question. It's a real blue sky. So go as high and as bonkers as you want. And I'm really curious as to what your answer is going to be, because you've already done a bonkers blue sky project. But what project would you do if you had unlimited funding and time?
So that is a great question, and it's something I actually am thinking about right now and trying to figure out how to do. I'm so blessed. I'm really lucky. I'm going to have a residency this summer of 25, at Mass MoCA for this summer, which is huge. You have to come visit. And I'm going to be honored at their benefit in May, on May 23rd.
That's exciting.
Very exciting. I'm so thrilled. But while I'm there, I am going to be thinking about whether there's a book. For years, people asked me where my book was, and that was one of the motivations to put the website up, because a book sounds so 19th century or something. I thought, well, I'm going to put a website up, and it's going to have everything I can think of on it so that people can stop asking me, where's my book? It kind of got worse after the site went up. I'm like, what's going on here? And I realized that what people were kind of saying was, the site is great, but there's so much there. Like, you could spend days and weeks. And that people want something and need something that's more focused. And so I'm really going to think seriously about whether there's a book, or, as somebody said last night, maybe plural, books plural, and what that would look like. So that's the gift of some time to think about that. But what I'm really interested in is the idea of, with some friends, and again, we're just starting these conversations, of putting together a cultural think tank. Some of the writing on the site, if you go to the political writing category under Explore on the front page of the site, you'll see some essays that I've written over the handful of years that really deal with, I would say, political cultural issues, right? And so in the same way that we're in a political emergency, we're kind of in a cultural emergency too. And people don't talk about the culture wars for nothing. They are culture wars.
Yeah.
So doesn't that automatically tell you that there's a role for culture in addressing some of the problems? I mean, it seems, when you think about it, a little obvious, and yet we're not doing, I think, a lot of the work that we could be doing. And I think that artists could be not the only people in the room, but central to some of those conversations that they're not really even engaged in for the most part right now. It's way beyond making a Shepard Fairey poster, as wonderful as they are. We need to be really talking about, as I said at the beginning of our conversation, how we build an agenda from the grassroots up, not from the oligarchs down.
Right.
And this is the hard work that we, the people, need to be engaging in right now, because, as someone said, I think it was actually de Gaulle, who said, politics is just too important to be left to politicians. And so we need to do this work ourselves. We need to be the leaders in this work, and not wait for someone else to do this for us.
Yeah.
I think that's my next project.
I love it. I love it. Aw, thanks, Ruby. Thanks for being on the podcast.
Oh, thank you so much for inviting me. I've been looking forward to this for now the last couple of months since you invited me, and been thinking about it a lot. So thank you so much.
Oh, it's totally our pleasure. Okay, we are going to wrap this up, and we want to do some thank yous. Thank you, of course, to Ruby Lerner for being on the podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you to Sky Park Tausig, our wonderful producer, Taras Matla at the University of Maryland Art Gallery, and Jonathan Formansky for letting us use your music. Thank you, as always, listeners, for tuning in, and again for Ruby for joining us today. We'll be back in 2 weeks. Bye.
Goodbye.
Hey folks, just a little clarification from Ruby that the numbers she spoke about at the beginning of this episode reflect her tenure at Creative Capital. Currently, Creative Capital has awarded over $55 million in grant funding and has worked with 1,010 artists.
We are The Art Equation. You can find us wherever you listen every other Thursday.
Thanks for being here with us. We'd really love to hear your thoughts. So please subscribe. And if you have a moment to leave a review, it really helps us out. We love the feedback. Talk to you soon here on The Art Equation. The Art Equation is a podcast from Now Be Here with support from the University of Maryland Art Gallery. Now Be Here is a directory and resource created by and for women and non-binary artists. You can find more information at www.nowbehereart.com. Oh, so good.
It's so much fun.
Oh my God. Okay,
Okay.
so let's have some lunch.
That's what I was going to say. Let's have some lunch.